We'll get started. My name is Jeremy Fojut. I am the co-founder of NEWaukee, and this is a program called the mentorSHOP that we do on a recurring basis. We usually pick leaders from around the community, talking about really their career trajectory, their story, and their advice on kind of growing your career or maybe starting your company. And we do this program as part of the Cloud Cafe that NEWaukee has every week. So if you're interested in more content, we're launching around 6 to 8 programs a week, and you can sign up for our newsletter and get information on all those programs. Today, I'm joined by Beth Ridley. How you doing, Beth?
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here on this overcast day. Not that we can really go outside anyways and enjoy it. But
well, we were talking before this that, you don't have to ask me to stay home twice when the weather's like that outside. Like, I'm okay with it.
Excellent. So, and just so everybody knows, this will be recorded or is being recorded, and it's airing to Facebook Live right now. So we'll get started, Beth, and with a couple questions. And anytime anybody has a question in the audience, you can put it in the chat. You can privately send it to me, or you can put it publicly, and I'll get to those periodically throughout the question and answer session. So I think we're in the time of really when nothing goes according to plan, Beth. But a lot of people have plans in their career, and I know that you were in the corporate world for a while. Can you tell us about your transition out of that, and maybe your experience in corporate, what you did, and kind of your beginning story type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, from a very young age, I always knew that, I'm a really curious person. So it was kind of hard to figure out like one path, like one career and sort of stick with it. So I always knew early on, like I wanted all the careers. And so I made a conscious decision that I would, try to almost reinvent myself maybe like every 4 years or so and move to a new job or a new industry. So that had always been in my mind. So if you look at my resume, it probably looks like to someone from the outside looking in that it makes absolutely no sense, but it always made sense to me. So early in my career, I pretty much wanted to just live overseas, and I had the opportunity to live and work in 5 different countries. And it was more, I wanted to go to the country, and I found the job to do that. And then when I moved to the United States, I started working in management consulting, which was a perfect fit for me, because then it's almost like every 6 months you get dropped into a new company, a new assignment. But then life happens, and I got married and we started a family. So that constant moving around either to different countries or different companies wasn't quite conducive for the lifestyle I wanted to have in terms of raising a family. So I sort of hunkered down at Northwestern Mutual, and I was there for 12 years. The nice thing about being there is they're really good about moving people around if you want to. So even over a course of 12 years, I had like 6 very different jobs. So it felt like a lot of different careers, but all under one roof. But after 12 years, I really started to think, no matter where else I go in the company, it will still always be under the umbrella of financial services. And I just kind of felt like I'm sort of ready to move on from that whole industry. And the one thing that I hadn't done yet was to be an entrepreneur. So I knew that that was the next step for me. But incredibly scary, the thought of leaving the certainty of a corporate job and some of the security and the comfort that comes with it, especially with a family now. It's not just me that I had to be responsible for. So while I had the desire to do it, it literally took me probably 3 years to muster up the courage to finally decide to leave. And I left June of last year.
3 years of building it up. Can you talk about decisions that you have to make during that process? And I guess how many times have you went back and forth? And
oh my God.
take people there.
That's all I did was go back and forth. And in hindsight, looking back, I can honestly say I only thought about everything that could go wrong. I'll never be successful. I'll never get clients. I'll be broke. I'll set a bad example for the kids. I'll so regret it. I literally only thought of everything that could go wrong. So in
No
my
more free lunches either.
no more free lunch, right? Yeah. So in my mind, I built up this fear of it was going to be almost impossible to leave and create a business, a financially viable career on my own. And I would just stew on that. And literally one night I was lying in bed and I thought, between the living with the regret of never trying or the fear of jumping into the unknown, I'd rather live with fear because I feel like I can manage my fear, right? I always say wine helps with that. Like there are ways that I can manage my fear, maybe even sometimes use it to an advantage. But once regret sets in, there is no antidote for regret. There is nothing. I cannot reverse time. So then it almost became like every day that passed and I didn't make the decision, I was allowing the possibility of regret to seep in anymore. So honestly, I woke up one day and it's almost like I ripped off the Band-Aid. I didn't at that point like have a business plan, but I also knew that if I gave myself the excuse of, oh, I have to lay down the groundwork so everything is perfect before I leave, I probably would never leave. For me, I know myself well enough that that was probably my crutch to not have to do something that was super, super scary. So I literally ripped off the Band-Aid and I announced that I was leaving. And then there was really no turning back. And now, 11 months in, I can honestly say, it's challenging for sure, but the fear in my head was way scarier than the reality of the situation.
And when you make that jump, I think, into entrepreneurship from the corporate world, people always tell you to write a business plan. I probably wouldn't even know what one looks like, but I'm just curious, did you have a bit, like how much planning did you do beforehand? Did you have a business plan? Is that something, and again, I'm not recommending don't do a business plan,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's like, you don't know, and you only know by trying, right?
That's right. Well, I think it depends on the business that you're starting. So
Yeah.
I did not have a business plan because I really didn't know what business I was going to start. I knew that I was going to be drawing upon all of my previous work experience, right? Working internationally and seeing really, despite cultural differences or language difference, what it is that really brings people together to be their best. All my management consulting skills, all of my leadership skills, it was really all centered around bringing out the best in everyone. So I knew it was going to be something like that, but I didn't have my ideas crystallized enough to even write a business plan. So I actually didn't have a business plan. And for me, I would say really it was the first 6 months of just trying to find that sweet spot between what I love to do, what I'm good at doing, and what people will pay me for. And I would say, I would just throw stuff out there. I would just get clients and the first clients, like, I'm good at it and they'll pay me for it, but I don't like the work. And then I would try to propose work that I would really love, but nobody wants to pay for that. So it was really kind of a dance of trying to find that. But I will say the only thing I did sort of in preparation was probably maybe a year before I left, I did start a couple of different side hustles while I was still gainfully employed to test ideas. Like, going out of the gate, like when I had to think about what do I want my company to be, I really thought it was going to be around like live events. So, I spent a year like curating and holding live events and inviting people and charging money. Because I think once you have to charge money for something, it takes on a whole different, feel. And I realized really quickly, oh no, that is just not for me. I don't have the temperament. I don't have the patience. I don't like having to worry about, like, are people going to show up? Did they pay? So at least I shortened the time it took me to figure things out by figuring things out somewhat while I was gainfully employed by just trying a bunch of side hustles, like almost pretending if I were to start this business, what would it feel like? And would I actually enjoy the day to day? Because for me, that was the main thing. I really wanted to enjoy the journey as much as hopefully the end result, because if I wasn't enjoying the process, I should just stay where I am because I liked my job. It's not like anything was wrong. I was running away from it. I liked it. So I didn't want to like go into something that honestly, when it comes down to it, the day to day, if I didn't like it, that had to be, it had to be really important to me to truly enjoy every moment. And the way I tested that was different side hustles.
Yeah. What did you have like a blueprint in mind for what you wanted to do then? You kind of talked about some of the side hustles, but then when you get going, like what is kind of the vision now of what you're doing and where you see it going?
Yeah. So my vision now is, and like I said, it took trial and error to get there, but I really am all things when it comes to leading with optimism, I guess I would say. And that would be like working with leaders and consulting in companies. And so there's like the whole consulting side of it, but then there's also the content creation. So, I do a lot of blogs and podcast series with CEOs and television segments, and really trying to establish myself as a subject matter expert, again, pulling together all my previous work experience. So I really like, for me, I really, really love that balance between content, which is a little creative. I get to put like my own spin and varnish on the subject. And then the consulting, which is a little bit more like I'm support and enabler for what the leadership or the leaders are trying to do. So for me, I like that balance. In corporate, I felt like I didn't have enough of that creative license. I mean, you sort of work within the guardrails or the confines of the corporate culture, and obviously financial services tends to be more conservative. So I'm really enjoying like being able to bring that mix between the business and the creative side through the content and the consulting. But again, like a roadmap, I had none, similar to like I had none in terms of the business plan, but I did know this. I did know that my guide was going to be defining success on my own terms. And that is really, really, really important for me because, I've, in different parts of my life, when I wasn't happy, when my job wasn't making me happy, it was because I allowed other people to define success for me. Like, getting to this level, that's what matters. Then you get to that level and you're like, this just sucks more than it did before. So for me, like trying to really be strong and not allowing things like status, title, the type of job that I should have define what I did. I really had to say, I'm defining success based on my own terms. I've got, you got one life to live. I'm going all in on that.
And you kind of mentioned something about the creativity of being in a larger company. And I kind of, I hear that a lot just in my work of like, I wanted to start my own because I wanted to be more creative. So I got outside of the corporate. And it always makes me think of why that can't exist in companies, or why that, like that, I guess that passion leads to starting your own thing. Or like, what are some of the observations maybe if people are on the call that are in the corporate track of how they can be more creative in the company? Sometimes I feel, and I've seen this in many companies throughout my career, that 3 people in a small business can get more done than 30 people in a company, in a big company.
Yes.
And I always wonder why that is. And so I'm curious for you, like if you have advice to people, as this is the mentorSHOP, if they're in a company, how do they be more creative in that company or get more autonomy to do so?
That's a really interesting question. I think it gets harder with bigger companies simply because there has to be some sense of order and formality to hold it all together. I mean, quite frankly, right? I mean, and imagine if everybody just got super creative and did their own thing, it would be chaos. So I don't necessarily blame cultures. I think it is almost a necessity just to keep everyone rowing in the same direction. And then quite frankly, the other thing is, culture is kind of like, people feed on themselves in the culture, right? So the tone, the attitude that really forms the culture is always start at the top, right? And so people set their cues based on what they see leaders doing. And then next thing you know, everybody kind of starts acting a little bit more the same. I mean, you sort of get like what you can do, what you can't do if you want to keep your job, simply put. With that said, I will say that I think I put more restrictions on myself in my corporate job, maybe than I needed to. I think that there would have been a little bit more tolerance to let some of my personality or my creativity come through. I probably just didn't have the confidence to want to test that. And so I put that more on me. So, for example, I will tell you, when I first started at Northwestern Mutual, it was a very strict dress code. I think like even women, if you wore a skirt, you had to wear pantyhose. Like who does that, right? You couldn't wear short sleeves or anything like that. Then maybe like a year or two ago, we went to Dress for Your Day. And then like literally the day after that was announced, it was, people were coming with like pink hair, the, pierced noses, and it was fun to see people's personalities really come through. It was really energizing. And so I do think that the modern workplace is going to become more tolerant and embracing that, because it adds to a thriving culture, which always adds to better business results. But I think in my case, I probably, didn't quite, I personally didn't feel empowered enough. And I think looking back, I probably could have expressed my own creativity a little bit more than I gave myself license to.
Totally. And like, starting your own company, tons of risk involved. And, day to day, I feel like when you start your own company, there's the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, everything in between. The feeling's different, and we're just talking about 5 minutes sometimes. What are what's advice you'd give people if they want to take risks? I mean, we're in the ultimate time of, I guess, taking new ventures, learning a new trait, learning a new skill, or trying something different, basically out of necessity, if we're out of a career or wanting to start something new. So what advice do you give really around risk in this time?
Yeah, I think I go back to my earlier statement of, two things. A lot of times, fear holds us back, and in many cases the imagined fear in our mind is always worse than the reality. Like once you're in a situation, I believe people are more resilient and creative than they give themselves credit for. I think we're all experiencing that as we're trying to make lemonade out of the lemons that we've all been served with the pandemic. So it's different when you're in the situation. You can maneuver and figure things out, but when you're not in the situation, you just have the luxury of time to think of everything that could go wrong. So one way of overcoming fear is give yourself permission to, every time you think of something that could go wrong, think of 2 things that could go right, because things can go right. And then I would also say, just go back to, in my personal life, I don't like to feel regret. Like out of all the negative emotions, disappointment, fear, jealousy, anger, regret's the worst, because like I said, it never leaves you. It sits. That's the definition of regret. You regret it. It sits in you. So I would say, between the choice of living with fear and living with regret, go with the fear option, because you can get over it and you can use it as a motivator and for your advantage.
With risk comes failure sometimes, or more opportunity or success. Take us to a time where you took a risk, it didn't work out, and kind of how you adapted to that and changed, and what you took away from it.
That's a really interesting question. And I was having a hard time really thinking of anything concrete, because I suppose if I took a risk and it didn't quite work out according to my expectations, it worked out some other way, right? Okay. So I have lots of examples of how something didn't materialize, or the end result wasn't quite what I thought, but I had another end result, and it was either just as good or better, or I managed it. So I don't have like a big, epic fail that I can actually point to, but I will say something that I've had to really work hard at over my career is not internalizing all the tiny little fails along the way. I tend to, I'm a fun-loving person, but I have the tendency to maybe take myself seriously and to take my work seriously too. Like I want to really do a good job. And when I stumble, I really, really, for most of my career, would really internalize that and I would stew over it, and I would personalize. I would personalize missteps and mistakes, and tiny little failures. I mean, nothing epic, but tiny little failures. And that caused a fair amount of like stress and anxiety in me. And it took a lot of, I guess, like age and wisdom and just some hard work to really, really look at failures as learning. I mean, like, intellectually, I get that, but it took me a really hard time to be able to be that, I guess, like zen and wise about failure, to see them as learning opportunities. So it's something that I really had to work on. And I always try to tell myself, while I want my work and my career to be worthwhile, I don't want it to define my self-worth. And so for me, it was like almost really working hard at creating distance between who I am as a person and how I make a living, right? And then therefore, when I don't hit the ball out of the park, that doesn't mean I am a bad person or a failed person. So working on keeping that distance to keep some perspective helps me not personalize all the tiny little failures that like probably make up my entire life.
Let's talk about like maybe a specific career advice around really a valuable lesson learned. You know, we again, my name is Jeremy. This is the mentorSHOP, and if you do have questions, you can go in the Zoom chat. This question will refer to like people that are coming on this call or this video call might want specific career advice because they might be not going the entrepreneur route and they might be looking at their trajectory. Could you give some specific advice around valuable lessons you learned in your career?
Yeah. And I want to, a lot of them are some of the things that we talked about. Just make sure you're defining success on your own terms. And, one of the things I did when I first left is I started a podcast series just talking about different people in their career trajectories. And there was this theme when people felt like they had to suddenly make big changes in their careers because they realized that for most of their life, they were living out somebody else's vision of success for what that was. So, you know, it's your own life to live. So definitely define success in your own terms. The other thing I would say is that there really is no one way. There's no one right way to do it, right? So I'm the type of person, like I said at the top of this, I wanted to have all the careers. And so I knew that I was going to be changing jobs like every 2 to 4 years. There's benefits to that, and there are downsides to that. But it's what I choose. And then I happen to be married to a man who he likes like steady progression and really sticking with one thing. So he's held jobs for like super long periods of time, and that works for him. So I just don't, you know, like don't think that there has to be one way. Again, it's your way. And it's your way based on your own definition of success. So I think to me, those are like the building blocks. Everything from there is just like technical fine tuning along the way. But I think as long as you have sort of that foundation to anchor you, you will be very happy, I think, in whatever profession you choose. And if you are happy, you'll be successful.
Yeah, you know, throughout people's careers, there's you know ups and downs, and obviously right now there's a lot of anxiety and maybe thoughts of like I'm not successful, maybe I got laid off, or maybe my company didn't work. Was there a time in your career where you felt like you weren't successful, and what did you do about that?
Yeah, so I thought about that question. So I would say it was maybe like my first significant, really big leadership role. I was asked to lead like a significant initiative for a company. I was forming a team, and long story short, by any measure, it was not going well. So, you know, there was a ton of dysfunction on the team. You know, people didn't like me as their leader. You know, the work wasn't progressing. Like I just couldn't course correct this train wreck that seemed to be happening. And this went on for like the better part of a year, probably over a year. And I was pretty darn miserable. I don't know if anybody has, you know, been so miserable in a job. It's like, you know, they say Sunday is the new Monday, like people hunker down and start doing work on Sunday for Monday. And whenever I had to do that, I would get like this pit in my stomach, like, oh, Monday's coming. Well, for me, that pit started on Friday. I'd be like, oh my God, Friday, then it's Saturday, but then that's one day closer to Sunday, which is one day closer to Monday. Like, that's how miserable I was. So, so literally like one day I was going to work in the morning, and I had stopped at Starbucks to get coffee, and I'm standing in line stewing about work, and I look over and I see this woman sitting at the bench reading a book and sipping a cup of tea, and she looked so calm and serene. And my first thought was, who has time for this? Like, why doesn't she have a job? And like, does she know like how horrible my job is and how horrible my life is? But then my second thought was, that looks so lovely. And then my third thought was, oh, I'm doing that. So I left work and I went to like a completely different Starbucks so like no one would find me with a magazine. And I just sat and I sipped tea and read my magazine for like 30 minutes. And I'm telling you, it was like the best 30 minutes ever, because I got outside of my world, my job, and I realized it is a big world out there. And there was plenty of joy to be had if I just looked up and just got out of my narrow scope of everything that's going on. So that experience actually inspired me to go on this journey of literally, I was going to try to do one new thing a week for a year. And the only criteria is the one new thing had to have nothing to do with my work at all, period. And so I did everything from, maybe shop at a new grocery store. I joined a band. I learned how to speed skate. And honestly, with every one new thing, I started to realize, again, my life is much bigger than how I earn a living. There is so much joy and excitement in the world if you just look up. And having some of that separation between what I'm trying to do at work and who I am as a person really, really helped me come to work with a fresh attitude, a little bit more of, I think just outside of being able to look at things a little bit more objectively. And with that mindset, I was eventually able to sort of course correct things. And so for me, the learning was, it starts with your own mental mindset. It really does. And that was such a key lesson that honestly, I bring that so much into the consulting I do today. And there are so many simple things that you can do to boost your own positivity, your own sense of resiliency, so that when you go to work, you are not so caught up in your own issues, but you're able to kind of be emotionally available for others and sort of see the bigger picture. And just overall have a more positive attitude. So that was a really pivotal point for me.
It's funny, you talked about going to a new shopping somewhere different and doing all these different things. And I think it's sometimes we get so caught up in a routine that's not even a thing you do. I know for the last couple of weeks, when I've been going for runs, I've been trying to run a new path every time to just put me in a different state. And getting outside our comfort zone. One of the things lately has been, or before COVID, was going to one new event that I had never been to before that someone else was putting on. So I'm not just going to my own stuff with something. Do you think that's something that, that's advice everybody should do, is like to get out of their comfort zone and try new things more often? Does that help? I think it helps with creativity in a way too.
Oh, it helps so much. Absolutely. And since then, I actually became a student of positive psychology, which is the scientific study of what makes humans thrive. I actually got a certification in it because I was so fascinated by how the brain works and why are we wired to have negative thoughts, but what we can do and the simple things that we can do to boost our own positivity and resiliency. And one of the main things is in investing in experiences, because experiences more than anything defines who we are as a person. And also it brings more lasting joy than material things. And so the more you can invest in experiences, it just, yes, it broadens your mindset, it broadens your world, it gives you perspective. You learn new skills, and so I'm a huge believer in experiences and investing in experiences, especially more than material things.
When you talked about new skills, just to add on to that, what are some skills that you would recommend if you were mentoring somebody? What are some skills for to grow in their career? What are skills you think they should have?
Yeah. All right. So I got two that are maybe a little bit unusual. So the first one is a skill around sense making. And I think that that is, especially in this sort of like crisis time that we find ourselves in, sense making is so important. So sense making is basically the ability to take a ton of information, maybe complex information, digest it yourself, but then presented in a way that's in digestible, bite-sized pieces for people. So getting really good at being able to synthesize and put your own point of view on something to make it more helpful, useful, digestible for others. I think in this day and age, people just are short on time. There's information overload. Um, you've got sometimes, 2 minutes to get your point across. So getting really, really good at distilling the essence of something in a short period of time in a condensed format without losing the substance, right? That's the key, right? Not losing the substance and turning something into too superficial. I think that's a really great skill. And especially the higher up you go in leadership, because you have to be doing that all the time for people. People are looking to you to make sense of the universe around them. So that's one skill that I think is really important no matter where you are in your career journey. And then the other one I would say is the ability to make emotional connection with people and really focusing on developing that, I call it EC, emotional connection muscle. Because at the end of the day, people are moved to action through optimism and inspiration. Like, we are all emotional people. I don't care how much data, stats, strategy you put in front of somebody. If you want to move people to action, and that's really what leadership is all about, you need to inspire people. And you need to be able to move people to action by tapping into the best of who they are and bringing them along through inspiration. And so again, there's so many simple ways to do that, like being interested in people, listening maybe more than you're talking, treating people with kindness and respect. I mean, these basic things, again, fundamental, and it doesn't matter the workplace, the type of person, those are things that carry over no matter what job you have.
We were talking about, when you talk about emotional connection, I've been having this during this time, having a hard time with somebody I maybe have talked to twice in a Zoom format to understand when we're actually maybe friends. If I've never met them before in person, they're like, can we not actually be friends until we meet in person? So it's just kind of, how do we create emotional connection online now?
Yeah,
As possible, obviously, but it's
that is
just,
our new normal
it's
now,
some
huh?
adapt, yeah, the next normal, right?
Yeah.
What about people that have inspired you personally? Like, everybody has people that surround themselves, or they hopefully have people that surround themselves with that. I would not necessarily just mentor you, but you go to for advice and they have a peer relationship that you trust.
Yeah, there are so many people, honestly. There's so many people. And I think my experience in corporate and as an entrepreneur is that people do want to help. They really, really do. And if never be too proud to ask for help or to share what you're struggling with or to reach out to get advice, because for the most part, people do want to be helpful. And I always found that when someone gives me advice, all of a sudden they're invested in me. Because if I don't do well, then maybe their advice sucked.
Their advice.
Wants to,
I'm
but
gonna take that now. It's like, yeah, this is your fault.
that's right, absolutely. So I would say, oh my God, I would have like volumes of books of all the names of people, and people more senior than me, people in my family, people more junior than me, neighbors, because I like to seek advice. I was really, I felt like when this whole coronavirus pandemic, came on us, like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And I really was in a state of dismay and despair. And the ironic thing is I built a business on optimism at work, and like my positivity tank was like completely dry. So I had reached out to a couple of leaders, some individuals who I had interviewed on my podcast, to literally tell them, I'm not feeling confident. I'm not feeling good. How are you doing and how do you do it? And with each conversation, I learned something that was super helpful for me that eventually helped me to get motivated and you know, to say I don't have to know all the answers, but you know, one day at a time, one step at a time, you know, I will figure this out. So, you know, there's so many people. I really look up to my older brother and sister who are very successful in their careers in their own right. And we recently have started working together on this venture called No Studios, if you've heard of it. And so they're older than me, so I never really, I always sort of admired them from a distance, but they were already off at college when I was like in middle school. So I never really got to see like how they do what they do and how they carry themselves in the professional sense. But now we all sort of work together on that sort of as a family project. And I really admire, the three of us are so different, but it's been fun to just learn from their process and methodology of how they do stuff. And so those are two people who come to mind because I just had the pleasure of working with them recently.
And because we have people on the the Zoom room here that are from all across Wisconsin, from what I can tell. What is No Studios really quickly so people can kind of get some context?
Yep, so super fast. It's a new, I call it a membership club for artists, creatives in Milwaukee. And so my brother is a screenwriter, and he's done a lot of stuff, and he won an Oscar. We're from Milwaukee, he lives in LA, but he always wanted to really uplift the amazing artistic talent that we have here. So he thought a physical space where artists and creatives of any kind, like you don't have to be a working artist, you could be, you know, someone who works in the corporate world and just want to be immersed in that community, can physically come together to collaborate, to have a supportive community, but to also showcase your talent. So there's a performance stage, there's a screening room, there's an events
a killer bar.
Yeah, the two of them, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really just trying to create a vibrant community and also showcase the diversity that really exists in Milwaukee. There are not too many places that you go in Milwaukee where it looks as diverse as we really are. So really trying to harness the best of Milwaukee.
Yeah, it's a great space for anybody that, you know, once we can be in public again, it's, you know, an amazing space to go check out. So I would make that on a field trip if you haven't been there, and maybe that's something where people can get outside their comfort zone.
Yeah, oh yeah, good one.
Let's just kind of close, you know, we're kind of approaching that 45 minutes. Let's close with a couple things. First, any books or speakers that you recommend people should check out right now?
Yes. Okay. So I'm really into Priya Parker. You've probably heard of her. She's the author of The Art of the Gathering. The Art of Gathering.
Yes, I'm reading it right now.
Oh yeah, there you go. So someone gave me that book because I was hosting an event at No Studios, and I was like, oh, let me learn about party planning.
It's really good. I'm only a few chapters in, but
it's so good. But her principles are a lot of the things that we were talking about. So think of events of any kind. It could be a baby shower or a board meeting. It's about bringing people together and pulling out the best in people so that we can be the best versions of ourselves together. And that means creating emotional connection. That means being really intentional about purpose. So she just sort of walks through simple ways to do that, a lot of examples. And again, gatherings of all types. And so I thought I was going to apply it to like party planning. I actually apply it to everything I do. I apply it to my consulting engagements. I apply it to one-on-ones. You know, I've been doing like a lot of virtual gatherings. I apply it to that. So that's one thing I read recently that I've gotten a ton of mileage out of. It's probably one of my best business leadership books that are not about specifically business or leadership.
Yeah, a lot of people that have recommended the book to me, so they go back and use it as a reference. So it's not like just one book you put after you read it, you're kind of done with it.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's recap this whole conversation. What do you want people to take away? Maybe one or two, or if you get ambitious, 3 things that people want to take for this to recap the whole conversation.
All right, so I thought about this, and I'm gonna actually quote someone as my recap because this advice that the person gave me literally like kind of changed my outlook on so many things. That's a nice summary of all the stuff that we talked about. So many of you probably know Richie Burke, like a local entrepreneur. And so he's talk about like, who do I go to for like advice and support? So he's one of the people. And quite frankly, when I first started having conversations with Richie, before I left Northwestern Mutual to talk to entrepreneurs about like, should I leave? I didn't even know him that well, right? But he gave me time. And so I continue to like pop in and see him every now and then. So one day I was talking to him and like, it just was not going well at all. And he was like, Beth, how are you? I was like, oh, Richie, I'm not good. Like, this is just not going well. And he goes, oh, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. Because you know what? Today is the worst that you'll ever be. He goes, every day you'll learn something new. So by learning, inevitably you're going to get better. If you simply hang in there, you're going to get better before you know it. And I thought, you know what? That's actually true. I shouldn't be so down on myself when it's not going well, because it's all part of the learning journey. And literally every day I'm going to get better. So today is the worst that I'm going to be. And if I can stand myself today, like, oh my goodness, like tomorrow, I can't wait. Let me go to bed, hurry up and wake up tomorrow. So I think, again, just sort of like, not internalizing failure, not personalizing failure, looking at everything as a journey and how you can learn and grow along the way, and trust that if you are defining success by your own terms, if you are leading a life centered more around what makes you happy than not, you will get better every day. So I love that quote. So I just like to share it whenever I can.
Excellent. Any questions of Beth from the audience? You can unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can type it in the chat, and I'll give 10 awkward seconds to have that happen. Otherwise, I have one kind of last final question. And maybe I can give you guys some time so if you have any questions, type them out, or you can unmute yourself. I'll kind of ask a question I like to ask of everyone, because I think it's such a vital question, especially when you're creating new things all the time, is what would 2020 Beth tell 2019 Beth?
It'll be okay.
It'll be okay.
It'll be okay. And maybe just stop worrying so much. Worry. I think worry is good. Keeps me on my toes. But I can go overboard a little bit with the worry. So, easy on the worry.
Yeah, I think mine's always like, not everything is as big a deal as you think it is. It could be a big a deal in that moment. And I always treat it like that. And then you realize, like, why did I care so much about that? That wasn't even a pivotal point in what we were doing for the whole year. And then half time you forget what that thing even was. But
yeah.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat. So any parting shots? Or we got one more question, actually. Mm-hmm. How do you advise your clients and this is from Benedict, or Ben, but short. How do you advise your clients to combat limiting beliefs? Yeah.
Yes. And again, I had mentioned earlier some of the best practices that are rooted in positive psychology.
Deep philosophical question for Ben.
Yep. Yeah. Right.
Thanks, Ben.
So rooted in positive psychology, which there's a lot of science and evidence-based research around how do we boost our own positivity, and recognizing that limiting beliefs is just part of our natural negativity bias. Like our brains are just hardwired to think bad as for survival mechanism, really. But if you can invest in some things and make them a little bit more habit in your daily life than not, it tends to boost your overall positivity, gives you more resiliency. So not so that you will never have negative thoughts. You can gain a lot of insight into negative thoughts, actually. I have this whole series on the hidden benefits of negative emotions. They're not wholly bad. The thing is, you don't want to stay negative for too long, and you don't want negativity to prevent you from moving forward. So if you do simple things like incorporating some version of being mindful, being present in the moment, not stewing too much about the past or fixating on a future that hasn't happened yet, being mindful, practicing an attitude of gratitude, just being appreciative of the things that are going well in life, investing in experiences like we talked about, and investing in positive relationships. Those are like the four that I try to focus on. And it doesn't take much, but a little bit of intention around that. You almost build up somewhat of like a little bit of a force field that really helps you to err on the side of being more positive than negative, but also have that sort of built-in resiliency muscle so that when negative talk starts to set in and self-limiting beliefs, you can kind of more quickly counter that and pick up and be able to move forward. So I actually do spend a lot of time with the leaders and the clients that that I talk to on that, and they seem to really resonate. It resonates, and people gravitate towards it because honestly, you don't need a big budget, you don't need a big strategic initiative, you don't need resources to be able to incorporate these things. These are all free things, and again, it's based in research and science that it actually will work to increase your overall positivity.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's if you ever go into like some of the old philosophy, like Socrates and all that, one of the things that they often talked about is why humans have such a hard time with beliefs or believing in things that can't be proven, which is always interesting. And like it's like a human trait to believe like maybe an optimism of this is going to work, or what that could be. You take that many different ways, but it is interesting. Even with the virus right now, people believing so many different things about it, even though it factually some of the stuff is incorrect.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting, a negative, and sometimes maybe a positive if you're going for optimism in the future. But with that, that's kind of how we'll wrap this up. Believing in the future, and like
And
as you
believing
said,
in yourself.
believing in yourself. So thank you for joining us, Beth.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, we have a couple other comments around a big thank you and very inspiring and beneficial and smiley faces. So it's all good. If you did come in late and you want to see this, we'll be putting out the recording on NEWaukie's Facebook page, the Twitter account, maybe even MySpace if we're feeling up to it. So thank you for joining us, Beth, and we'll
Thank you
talk
so
soon.
much. Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
I'm going to do this. I don't like the way all these things end, like they kind of just end so abruptly. So I'm going to do this little like clap in my window. So round of applause. Cheers. Take care.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.